Welcome to Opal TV. Today I'm in London at the office of Cordium. Cordium is a global regulatory and compliance consultant. I am joined by Stephen Burke from the London office and Bill Mulligan, who came here from the US. Now Stephen, please remind us, what's Cordium and how did the company come about?
So Cordium was a new name for two long-standing compliance companies that have existed and operated in the regulatory compliance sphere, particularly focused on hedge funds really for the last 15 years. IMS Consulting was the UK business and HedgeOp Compliance was the US business. And we came together at the beginning of 2012, merging our firms to create what we think is is a global firm focused now on providing those very same services to clients both here in the UK and in the United States and also in Asia, where we're expanding quite rapidly.
This element of extraterritoriality, where one regulator is affecting managers that are domiciled and work from a different jurisdiction, this has been criticized a lot in the industry. But I'm wondering, are there some positive aspects to that?
Well, clearly, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of feedback out there about the negative aspects of it and sort of the reach of certain regulators. But our practical experience has been is once they've sort of worked through the reality of it, let's say accepted the reality of what needs to be done, you do from time to time find some pretty significant efficiencies. And we're seeing that when we're working with a particular client that maybe is located in London and has got registrations effective in the US, we are working as a team to say, what do we need to do for this client? What do we need to do to ensure that the client, from a procedural standpoint, is doing what they say they're going to do as it relates to their regulator? And as we assist them on it, we realize, wow, there is overlap. And we can really build a program that will be much more efficient in its execution because we'll use a similar task to serve two masters.
Yeah, so to add to that, I mean, really the way that efficiencies are driven out really means that one standard applies. For years, firms have been looking at trying to create a global standard, a highest common denominator at which to operate, so that they can meet the needs of any regulator that they have to deal with. As business becomes more global, it's inevitable that regulators around the world will be responsible for different aspects of firms' businesses. And firms have historically dealt with that as a patchwork of, I'll comply with that regulator and this regulator. What extraterritoriality does is essentially it brings all of that home. And so, for instance, you've got firms based here in London that are regulated by the FCA, CFTC, the FINRA and the SEC all at once, and they haven't even left the UK. Then as they grow and they move to other jurisdictions, as they expand their businesses, actually those moves are a bit easier because they've already learnt how to deal with the needs of foreign regulators and regulators operating in other jurisdictions.
So how do you see, for example, startup firms coping with these regulatory and compliance costs?
Well, in Europe, we are seeing quite a dramatic impact on the startup market with the AIFMD really dominating the agenda. Managers are finding it hard enough to raise capital. The capital raising market for new managers has not changed, and AIFMD isn't helping because what it's doing is it's creating many more barriers to entry, mainly because of the uncertainty as to how the regulatory scheme will actually apply. And so new managers at this point, as far as we can see, are waiting on the sidelines to see how the uncertainty unfolds and how the solutions that will inevitably emerge will be costed and will be available to them. So I'd expect a return of new managers, and probably in much greater numbers than we have today, but not until after the AIFMD uncertainty begins to recede.
Now, how is technology today helping managers to reduce these costs?
What we're seeing is, and it's really been an evolution of the firm, is the way we've delivered services over the years. We've really, over the past few years, greatly expanded technology and how we do it. And it has resulted in us, frankly, doing things from a times perspective, a demand on the client, much more efficiently. We've realized that, when you look at compliance as a whole, really, it's a series of tasks. And the focal point in dealing with these series of tasks is doing it in a very organized, demonstrable way, really, to show exactly what was done, when it was done, who communicated with who. And frankly, we've focused a tremendous amount of resources and time on building technology tools around that. And one of the other big costs that you'll see coming out of compliance is really going back historically, because when you think about it, firms will, whether it be the SEC, the CFTC via the NFA, whether it be the FCA, they're going to go in and talk to managers and say, from a compliance monitoring oversight perspective, what have you done? How can you demonstrate to me that you do everything not only that we require you to do, but what you tell your investors you're going to do in the form of your compliance procedures? And using technology around those tasks, around employee obligations, attesting to certain policies, filling out questionnaires, reporting their personal securities transactions, the use of technology to do it not only made the task more simple, because you're, let's say, leaving the world of inefficient paper and reviews and hours of going through documents. It helps there, but it also helps in recreating the wheel, because you're looking at it and go, well, here's our workflow applications and our archiving of what we've done, when we did it, what questions came up when we addressed a certain task, and it gives you a much more seamless view. Because what you see many firms have trouble from a compliance perspective is that demonstrating piece of who did it, why it was done, what questions arose when you did it. And we think technology has played an enormous role in that. And obviously the sharing of information. There are still many firms who monitor personal trading through getting paper statements, and you've got a pile this high on the table that you've got to review. We've taken the approach of having our clients report that electronically. We have links with the different institutions where they trade. As they trade, that information seamlessly comes down into the system and then runs through whatever set of rules you have. So that's just an example of how it's done. But that's where I think technology, because remember, the function of cost when you think about compliance, whether it's the FCA, whether it's the SEC, they come out, it's time. It's saying, here is a new responsibility. One of the first things they tell you in filling out an ADV or a Form PF or dealing with compliance with a particular role is it is expected to take X man hours. And X man hours then has associated costs with it. Using technology in a variety of these different tasks reduces the man hours, reduces the costs, and allows for more really efficient communications. In our perspective, it's between our team of compliance consultants and their clients, but the same is true for clients who use technology directly themselves. It reduces the amount of time they need to spend on it.
The other thing that's changing globally are the rules regarding fund distributions. What's your view on that?
The AIFMD was pronounced by the European Union essentially to offer managers the opportunity to sell funds right across Europe on a passported basis, which, on the face of it sounds like a very good thing. However, what's happened is essentially disturbing range of practices and ways of raising money that have existed for many years. And so we've got a fair amount of disruption now in the market as to exactly how you market and who you can market to. This year we're in the midst of a year of transition, and up until the transitional period started, there was certainly a big focus on ensuring that firms had marketed to as many of their potential clients as they could, because there is this idea that they can then rely upon reverse solicitation during the period that follows, and instead of availing themselves of the passport. Passport applications are now available for those firms that are European AIFMs, so registered here in Europe. And we're only now beginning to see the process of those passports being implemented. However, with the passport comes the need to provide significant information to European regulators. So our Form PF equivalent, our Annex 4 reporting, needs to be filed in each of those jurisdictions, as well as additional investor information, managers are gearing up to how they deal with that if they're inside Europe. If they're outside of Europe, coming in from the United States, then they need to look at whether they really want to be in the European market, and they're now grappling with whether they can provide the information that's required, as well as meet the jurisdictional cooperation arrangements which the European Union require. So this is another example of the extraterritoriality we talked about earlier. But the landscape is being significantly remapped. At the moment, there's a fair degree of uncertainty here in Europe as to how marketing can be achieved by many managers. And many managers are really looking at how their marketing strategy operates as to whether Europe's important to them or not.
I think from the U.S. perspective, the feedback we're getting is further to the point of Stephen, because there's so much uncertainty around it, is how U.S. managers who market into the EU are going to deal with AIFMD. There are quite a few that we know of that market quite a bit, and raise funds from the EU. We talked about the reverse solicitation, which I think will be a quite prevalent way because they will be able to rely upon that. But how it's going to affect them, so we have to see how that uncertainty evolves. On the U.S. front, from a fund distribution perspective, obviously the big development was the Jobs Act. And frankly, what we're seeing is from the established fund arena, we're not seeing much movement at all, because I think established funds, for the most part, do not necessarily are not as interested in expanding their marketing capabilities. They've grown to be quite large and quite successful within the constraints of the existing private placement regime. And frankly, the Jobs Act adds requirements and costs and time if one wants to, or a firm or a fund wants to elect to take advantage of that expanded opportunity. So we're not seeing it. Clearly today we've talked about a lot of the challenges, the complexities, the uncertainties that asset managers and private fund advisors in particular are facing in the global regulatory arena. But I think one of the big things that people need to do at a variety of levels is just recognize this is the new reality. You've got to face the new reality, and there are tools and processes out there that can get you to help you get to the other side of this. So the key thing that you need to do, there's a lot to do, but one of the big problems people face is an inability to take it on. And really what we need to do is people need to look at it and say, what exactly do I need to do? Can I do it myself? And do I need help in actually addressing it?